Just find a comfortable position with the spine straight, but also soft, relaxed. Take a minute to notice how the body is feeling. Just breathing in, breathing out, relax, letting the body release whatever it might be holding. Keeping our attention on our breathing, letting the fresh air that comes in restore and refresh the body. And exhaling, relaxing a little more each time. Many of you are seasoned meditators, but regardless of how long we've practiced, we want to come to each session with a fresh attitude, open attention, awareness of how the body is, how the mind is. Being present and aware. Notice if you feel any tension in your face, around your eyes, in your jaw. And then on the next exhalation, see if you can feel it relax, soften. Let the shoulders drop. Release any tension across your back, in your belly area. Relax your arms and hands. Relax your legs and feet. With each in-breath and out-breath, we can bring a sense of gratitude, a sense of peace and joy, just being present, safe, relaxed. Still attending to the breath, we can notice any activity in the mind. And even just noticing it with a kind attitude can help it relax and calm down. Breathing in, breathing out, experiencing the activity in the mind and inviting it to become calmer with each in-breath and out-breath. And as the body becomes more and more calm and the mind settles, you can start noticing any feelings of joy, pleasant feeling, happiness, regardless of how subtle it might be. Just setting aside everything else and being aware and present, joy arises. Joy begins to spread through the body as we pay attention to it. Feelings that come with relaxation and happiness, with this presence, this awareness, this mindfulness and clarity. It feels so nice to be together, to practice together. To be preparing the mind to listen and reflect upon the Dhamma. Such a beautiful way to spend some time. Just meditate for a few more minutes. Relax. Enjoy. Okay, so come together to talk about the Dhammapada. And so what we decided is we would just read verses and discuss them and go as far as we want to go in the time we have together. And last time we ended with verse 8, so we'll start with verse 9. And by the way, we're so fortunate to have this wonderful bhikkhuni join us from Italy. I said, do you know this verse? Or number whatever, and she starts just saying the Pali, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it was so wonderful. A real scholar. Maybe she can give us insight into some of these things. And we'll just see how this goes. So verse number 9. Whoever wears the monk's yellow robe while being depraved, devoid of self-control and truthfulness, he surely is not worthy of the yellow robe.
Different translation. Yeah, your translation are just slightly different.
Okay, what does yours say?
Well, some of the same. Whoever being depraved, devoid of self-control and truthfulness, should don the monk's yellow robe, he surely is not worthy of the robe.
Okay.
Yes.
Number 9.
Number 9.
Oh, you have a
Number
different
9.
book. I have a different
It's
book.
the same. Yeah,
It's the
this
same.
is from.
Number
It's number 9.
9.
Yes.
But.
Oh, I see.
Page 6.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
What kind of thing am I reading the?
I was reading about evil.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's just so nice to hear it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anikatao kapa wamyo vatam paridahi sati apeto dhamma sachena na sukasa vamarahati.
So does anybody have any comments, questions? I'm kind of like,
I do.
yep.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
I'm not being funny. When I feel like out of control, I feel depraved.
Uh-huh.
I know what that feels like. I mean, I don't act on it,
Right.
but I do feel depraved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hmm. So we can empathize. But when I started to go visit the monasteries where my son was living as a monk, and I got a chance to talk with monks quite a lot, especially the ones my son would bring over with him to visit me. They talked about how much heavier the karma is when you do things that are wrong, when you're in the robes. And I really feel that sense, and I'm not talking about um, the minor etiquette kind of things or the minor customary things, but real uh, moral issues, it's really important to be completely trustworthy in our speech and actions, and that what you were talking about, Elizabeth, of feeling that in the mind, I think it's so important that many of you have heard me say this many times, but I think it's so important that we remember that any kind of thought can come up in the mind or energy come through our system. As long as we do what you were saying, you don't act on it, but you recognize that this is just old karma. It's from the past. We don't have to own it. We don't have to feel bad about it. We just need to handle it properly. And for the most part, that's being extremely mindful and conscientious about what it is, and not taking ownership of it and not perpetuating it in any way. To really see it as not ourself.
Could that be physical as well?
It in the way that it can, be a physical feeling. Yes, like anger sprouts up in the mind. You feel that in the body. So in that way, yes. But actions that we take with volition, that's where we really have responsibility. That's where we create the newcomer. And even when we think, add, energy to thoughts that are unwholesome, or even the beating ourselves up for things we've done in the past, it perpetuates this going forward. It reaffirms that same kind of thought pattern or energy, and then it's more likely to come up again. Whereas if we really see it for what it is, okay, this comes from causes and conditions that occurred in the past. And right now, whatever the situation is, that's what's arising. We don't have to go too deep into it unless we've never examined it before. So sometimes we do. It's very helpful to stay present with the feeling until it fades, to recognize that it's just arising and ceasing. It's not going to stay. One of the advantages of anicca, it is impermanent.
So that's action. So if it's a thought,
Yeah, they say that the karma from thought comes back as thought, and the karma from words come back as words, and the karma from action comes back as action. I don't know if that's really holds in every case, but if it's a thought, then you want to recognize: is this what I want to be thinking? Is this just something that should be set aside or recognized for what it is? This is unwholesome. I'm not going to entertain this thought. I'm going to, look underneath if I need to make sure that I'm handling the root of it. It doesn't come back. Or if it does, I handle it the same way again. It's just old karma. Yes.
So how do you think it's a stronger thing if you're wearing a robe than if
Oh.
you're a layperson?
Okay, so when it comes to speech and action, if a monk or a nun tells a lie, it's a much heavier thing than if you're a layperson, because we're wearing this, sign of being a representative of the Dhamma, of the Buddha. We should be completely trustworthy. If a monastic is inappropriate sexually, for example, that's a very much bigger thing, because we're basically saying that we're safe, and we're, presenting ourselves as those who really keep the moral virtue intact. And to not do that is heavier.
Yeah, may I
As a
chip in?
result.
There's something interesting actually in Nepali text, because if you look at this last line, Naso Kata Arahati, and then the next verse, the opposite, so you're worthy of that. So it's, this Kasava means like the robe, and Arahati means being worthy of, but Arahant is also the Arahant, so the Arahant is the worthy one. So it's actually playing on words, because the robe is the banner, it's exactly what Venerable is saying. So since the robe is the banner of the Arahant, but you are not worthy of the robe, so you're also like not worthy of wearing the banners of the Arahant. It's kind of, it's like a little play on word if you look at the actual line. So it's saying exactly that.
I want you on camera. Are you good?
No, it's fine. I mean, I'm not but I have to say.
Would be able to hear that?
Could you hear? Yeah, online.
They're nodding.
They're nodding. Are they nodding? Going to sleep? Or are they? Okay. Great. Thank you. That's great. And then these are pairs. So as you were saying, Venerable, but whoever is purged of depravity, well established in virtues, and filled with self-control and truthfulness, he indeed is worthy of the yellow robe. So I'd imagine that in that version that some of you have, that's a little bit different, worded a little bit differently in the translation, but the same idea, worthy of the banner of the Arahants. Better behave. I actually have no concerns about these two on my side. But yeah, it's a good reminder, and those young monks that would be talking about this, I think it was really, they took it in so seriously, and were so dedicated to keeping the Vinaya well, and living in a good way. It was beautiful. Yes, Kierdwin?
Yeah, I have a question. Okay, I think I may have related this story to you maybe a couple of years ago, where I have caregivers, and I ask them to do things, and they do them, and I generally have like a specific way I'd like them to do it or whatever, and sometimes they don't do it that way. My one of my caregivers in particular, and he often is on his phone when he is at work, and I get really irritated with him about it. And there was this one day when we were going somewhere, and he had to go inside to get something. I don't remember what it was, but I was waiting out in the van, and he was taking way longer than I thought. And so in my mind, immediately I'm thinking, oh, he just got on his phone, and he has ADHD. Okay, so if he gets on his phone, like, he is not aware of time. And so I was sitting there getting more and more irritated. And then I went from the irritation to sort of muttering under my breath, what's taking so long, or something like that. And then I suddenly realized that he had somehow come out when I didn't see him, and he was standing sort of right behind my field of vision.
Uh-huh.
And it was really instructive for me because it's sort of like, so there's the judgment, there's the irritation that arises and the anger. And then when I'm speaking it out, it's like, but I'm encouraging the judgment, in my mind.
Yeah.
And then I'm saying the words, and I would never say them to him directly because I don't want to cause harm to someone. But there he was. And it's like, so it sort of felt like I did cause harm. I don't actually know if he hurt me, but I feel like that could have easily caused harm to him to hear these angry words, judgmental words. And so I've been trying to notice that when it comes up, but sometimes I don't quite know what to do with it because the judgment is there,
Mhm.
and I don't want to just suppress it. Like I
Right.
try to notice when it's coming up and to not sort of, like, one thing that helps me is to step back and not involve myself in the story of it. Like, oh, he's doing that thing with the phone again, and he's, blah, 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 all the mental proliferation that happens. Um, if I'm not super careful, the mental proliferation can happen. So I just was wondering what comment you might have about that.
I think that you're onto it, stepping back and trying to remove the personal triggering, if you can, like stepping back and how can I look at this in a more objective way without the sense of self involved? And then evaluating, okay, I have this feeling. So when we have a feeling of impatience or like things aren't happening in the right way, there can be a very strong urge to want to do something, and it can be pretty intense. And I think a lot of times that drives our mental proliferation and it drives our speech potentially. And so if we can just notice, okay, there's a lot of energy here, and I'm feeling like something needs to happen urgently. But is that really true? So to investigate, okay, is that really true? Is it going to matter if it's another 5 minutes or 10 minutes? And then, you know, seeing if we can let the energy calm down and reflect on this with a cooler head, you might say, so that we can think, okay, is this really something that's worth my talking it over with him or not? The fact that it took longer, whatever, that kind of thing, just to as a practice, as a discipline, staying present with the feeling, seeing if we can be patient with the feeling, endure the feeling, stay present with the feeling, and then when the feeling starts to fade, try to evaluate what really is important here and what's not important here. What's really just my, you know, being triggered, or what is the underlying fear perhaps, or, like really, really looking at ourselves. And then of course, like I just said, we can always evaluate, well, is there really something to be done here? Like maybe that there needs to be a conversation about how the work is being done. But when we've gotten past that surge of feeling, we're much better at being able to determine whether or not we should do anything about it. And this is great practice because regardless of the situation and what that feeling is, if we gain the ability to stay present with the feeling, even though it can be really uncomfortable, that's a way that we gain mastery over our mind. And of course, we don't want to just be managers of feeling. This is something Ajahn Gunha said to us this last visit. You don't want to just be manager of feelings. We also want to really shift away from the sense of self being the center of attention and what we base our life on, what we base our approach to life on. We want to really take our stand in the Dhamma. So the more we can do that, it's like, okay, we have a situation where there's a lot of feeling arising, and then what is it like to step back enough to see what is happening in the present moment from the perspective of Dhamma, rather than a perspective of self and what the self feels it needs and how the self is triggered because of past conditioning.
So that phrase, manager of feelings, that really strikes me. Yeah.
I mean, we do want to be able to manage our feelings because otherwise we make all kinds of more karma, but we want to go beyond that.
Yeah.
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 My therapist the other day, I'm reading a Parami's book and that I've done Suchita book in another, and he talks about feelings. And my therapist reminded me that feelings have a basis in our biology. You know, there are evolutionary reasons for having certain of our reactions, and I have to keep reminding myself that my body is going to react certain ways because of evolutionary protective mechanisms or reproductive mechanisms or whatever.
Yeah.
Needed, and to have to find the way to integrate both my intention and my biology at the same time.
It's true. And I'm not, hello, Danielle, welcome. It's not even necessarily to integrate them, but to really see that the body is operating on its own agenda.
Mm.
And there are a lot of feelings that will come up just because that's what's baked into us, really, the drive to survive and the fear that can arise or anxiety that can arise. So much of it in the body just reacts. And when we practice mindfulness to, and really observe our mind and our body, even with, like some insight, we might have a very different mental attitude about what's happening, and still the body is reacting because that's what the body does. You touch something hot, the body pulls back. It doesn't, you don't make a decision about that, right? And of course, whatever is happening in the whole mechanism is, like, understand better scientifically now probably than ever before. But the point is, yeah, this body it doesn't really belong to us. We can't, it's on its own, it's on its own timeline, it's got its own agenda, it has its own reactions. There's all kinds of forces and causes and conditions going on within it. And so again, not to feel bad about what the body's doing, but to recognize it and see what we need to do to support it or help it, or just knowing, like a wise parent or something, you're seeing, okay, the body is having a fit here, but it'll be okay. You're gonna be okay. Yeah. Yes.
Could you say more about being with feelings?
Yeah, and it's really useful to practice when you're not in a intense situation, because we can get triggered by all kinds of things. And say we have a strong desire for something, then you feel that desire in your system, and instead of just going and getting whatever it is, maybe it's some kind of food, or maybe it's whatever desire to be distracted with some entertainment or something, can I wait and just be present with that urge, be present with that feeling? And the best way to do it is to identify where it kind of presents itself in the body. So you have this desire to have something, or this desire to get rid of something, and just noticing that feeling. Where is it showing up? Even thinking of some memory, maybe some past traumatic event, or even if it's not really trauma, something that like brings up some emotion. And then notice where you feel it, and maybe your throat tightens, or it's in the gut, around the heart or whatever, and you just observe that. It's helpful, I find, to close my eyes and notice where it's at, and kind of ask some questions about it, really investigate. Some of the questions that are recommended, depending on what kind of form or format or method you use, is things like just noticing the spread of that feeling, like how big is it, or what color is it? If it had a color, what's the texture? If it had a texture, like sometimes it feels like a solid rock of granite in your heart, or maybe some cold iron something, or a hot coals, or whatever it is, but you're just observing. And because you're asking questions about it, and that helps engage your mindfulness. You're not caught up in it. It's not like I'm feeling this feeling and I have to do something about it now. And then you start to, really master that. You can really be present with almost anything, or maybe anything. And even present with it for as long as it takes to pass. Some feelings can be so strong, maybe hormonally triggered, or some other kind of thing going on in the system. It might even be days of kind of having this feeling arising off and on. It's not steady, probably, but you still keep staying present with it. Come back to it again and again, be present with it, instead of doing something to, kind of placate it, or indulge in something that would satisfy it for a little while, because it never really works entirely. And so, like I said, that kind of practice is important, so that we recognize that we don't have to be pushed around by those things. Miss Allison?
Yeah, I just related to Karen's story a lot because I do the same thing. I imagine something happening that I really don't like, and it just kind of proliferates. Like, I don't like it because of this, and this is happening, this is happening. But you had no idea what was going on, right? And I'll do the same thing. I'll project.
Mm-hmm.
And recently I've been trying to, and it's been working pretty well. I'll realize that it's a story, it's not reality, it's not what's actually happening.
Right.
And if I can realize that, then I realize that the only thing I'm doing is creating anxiety or fear or anger in myself, and that I'm the one doing that. I'm doing that to myself, and can I be kind to myself and just realize this is not reality, this is not what's going on. And that's really helpful. I think it's like helpful in like also not selfing, like not getting involved with it. And I just wanted to.
Yeah, it's great. And it's to see that separation, because we can go through a whole lifetime just buying into our own stories and continuing to suffer for those things. So yeah, it's really, thank
I
you.
end up laughing sometimes because when I realize, I go, oh God,
Yeah.
how can I be doing that? It should seem so, but in a funny way,
not in a
judgmental way.
No, good.
Yeah, it's helpful.
Good. Are we ready to move on to the next pair? Those who mistake the unessential to be essential and the essential to be unessential, dwelling in wrong thoughts, never arrive at the essential. Would you share the Pali with us?
Okay, yeah. Sare saramattino, sare cha saradattino, te saram nadigachanti, ichha sankappa gocharam.
There's a version of the Dhammapada that has stories associated with each of the verses, and that's commentarial. But it's kind of interesting. With this one, I thought, okay, I wonder what story they have paired up with this. And the story is about, what were their names before they met?
Like Hariputta.
Yeah. Do you remember? Sariputta and Mahamoggallana, they weren't known by those names until after they were with the Buddha, but before they met the Buddha, or before Venerable Sariputta, I think you might know the story of how he saw one of the first disciples of the Buddha after his enlightenment walking for alms, Venerable Asaji. And he just saw the way he looked, and he just knew that this person really had found something. His whole demeanor, the way he looked, the way his deportment was, and how he carried himself. And so he asked him, who's your teacher? What Dhamma are you, learning or whatever? And Asaji told him in brief, is it all things that are, all things that arise cease, something like, something like that. And according to the commentary, Venerable Sariputta became a stream enterer in that very moment because he had been practicing hard. And he and his friend, who was Mahamoggallana, they had a pact that they would really search, and if they found enlightenment, they would let each other know. And so they had a teacher, but they saw that what this teacher was teaching wasn't going to really lead to the ending of suffering. And so they were both searching. And so when Venerable Sariputta asked Venerable Asaji, who was his teacher, he told him, of course, about the Buddha. And so Sariputta went to find Mahamoggallana, told him what he had heard, and then according to this way of telling the story, Mahamoggallana immediately became a stream enterer because just hearing it from Venerable Sariputta. And then instead of going directly to the Buddha, they went back to their teacher because they wanted him to be able to come with them. We've actually found, know now that there's this fully enlightened Buddha, and we're going to go to him. Why don't you come with us? And the teacher, Sanjaya, he said, but I'm a teacher of, many, many people. If I were to do that, it would be like a big jar of water becoming like a little cup. I can't be someone else's student. I mean, what a missed opportunity, right? And so this was the story that was used to point at missing the essential. And his pride kept him from being able to get the true Dhamma, the exposure to the Buddha. So it's like, okay, when we make the mistake of being engaged in the unessential, we think it's essential, and the essential to be unessential, we never arrive at the essential. And then, if I take this into like daily life kind of reflection, then we are probably frequently engaged in something that's really unessential. Maybe thinking it's really important at the time. And then maybe it isn't, Or I remember people talking about mistaking the urgent for the important. It's like some things can feel really, really urgent, and yet they're not very important. I don't know. What do you think?
Is that a sort of definition of delusion too? This kind of thing?
Well, there's certainly delusion there, right? Because you can't see what's really essential and what's really not essential. And then how would you ever recognize or even discover the essential?
Well, when my mother had dementia, I thought it would be essential that she knew where certain things were in the house. So I made up these stickers and I posted them everywhere in the house. And then when I went to a support group, they said, no, that's not essential. That was not. Not.
Yeah.
And I learned that that was not the way to communicate with her.
That's why all my cabinets were labeled too in the kitchen, so that he would know where things were, but.
Yeah.
So, say more about why that wasn't effective and what really is a good way to communicate in that circumstance.
I think that thought was coming from me because I thought this is what I thought she needed to know. Then the support group informed me that to be with her was to listen to her when she said somebody came in here and moved everything. So that was the dialogue. It was not about me trying to satisfy me.
Yeah. Or to, I mean, because, my mom didn't get serious dementia, but there was a little bit. And at first I would correct her, right? Try to because I figured she would, if I just remind her, she'll remember and that'll be better, right? And then I, of course, learned that was just making more stress. It wasn't going to be helpful to correct her.
It wasn't helpful. Yeah.
It wasn't helpful. And then, I don't know, some of you have probably heard me say this before too, but a friend of mine recommended this book called Contented Dementia, which I found to really be wonderful. And it's very much about what you're saying, Olive, about really, really being there in their reality. And my mom's reality never really, she always remembered who we all were. She could, call everybody by name. But the things that she didn't remember, just let it go. It's like, it's okay. And in the book, the stories were wonderful about, regardless of whatever this person thought their situation was, to be there with them and listen and support them, and having that be a pleasant memory or a pleasant feeling rather than something to be afraid of or to feel bad about, to feel ashamed of because she didn't know or something like that.
Yeah, like to label things is like, no.
Yeah.
I'm thinking as a lay person, so I know pretty much what's truly important, and it's not so much what's in the world.
Right.
But on the other hand, I have to buy groceries, I have to pay bills. And it's not that so sometimes I get pulled over a little bit too much into that world of taking care of things. And it's not, some of it's essential, but some of it isn't. And it's a little tricky because I get a little, for instance, how clean I want to keep the house, or I don't know how many groceries I really need in the house.
Right.
It just gets a little blurry. And the whole world is operating, there's it's pretty, most people would say the things that are essential, they're not the most essential to me, or they're not high up on the list. So it's really paying attention to when I'm slipping over into getting a little too busy with stuff that maybe does. And then some of that stuff gives me pleasure. For instance, gardening. It's not essential, but I kind of enjoy it. So, but even then, I have to pay. How much time do I want to put in this?
Right.
So the question is uplifting your heart one of the things that actually is essential? Like gardening.
Right. But I mean, there's just so much energy and hours. So if I'm, there's sometimes I'm taking care of what, really what I have to. It's just paying attention.
Believe me, I'm working on our estate planning. Tell me about it.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, really just kindly being aware of, is this the way I want to spend my time? Or how we do the gardening also makes a difference, if we're mindful and aware, it feels like meditation, it has those qualities. So lifting up the heart and having the quiet and observing, it really is, it's how we do it too, so these are obviously wholesome activities that we have to evaluate, like what is the right thing at this point in time. Paula?
I really like this verse a lot because after listening to a little bit of Ajahn Sumedho's talk the other day on retirement, it was kind of interesting how he said that he was like really restless when he first stopped being in charge of things. And I find that a lot too, that, as much as I've like kind of my biggest priority right now is awakening, understanding the Dhamma, but you can't do it 24/7, but there's a lot of times when I find myself just not utilizing my time well. And it's not, I'm okay with cooking, but do I need to cook? It's kind of like what Elizabeth was saying. Do I need to really, I could cook simpler. It could take all morning sometimes to preparing food. And is that really how I want to spend my time? Or how do I want to spend my time? And how can I get myself to do it? What's great is the Upasaka program, which some of us are in, but not all. And when that Upasaka day comes, it's like, oh, this is great. I don't have to do anything else. Just focus on the Dhamma and then decide the best way to focus on the Dhamma. There's always that, but that's a struggle. I think that's a big, 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 big struggle. So whatever you have to say about that would be great. To how to get yourself to have that restraint and focus.
There's a lot of options for that, right? Having our Kalyana Mitas, our teacher, and, kind of like being able to reflect on, the value of what we're doing. And like I said, it depends on how we're doing it. A morning cooking mindfully can be a wonderfully uplifting, restful thing to do. Not a problem. However, watching the news, that could be a detrimental experience, especially taken in large doses. Noticing when we get caught up in things, and it really does have a negative effect on our mental state, things like that. So we don't want to get too rigid about all this, like, oh, am I spending my time in the very best possible way? Because that can get a little obsessive too. But to just, okay, when you really look at it, what's essential? What's really important? What leads me closer to awakening? What leads me away from it? And most, moral actions, it could go either way. Talking to my daughter or my son on the phone, that can be a really important, uplifting, nourishing thing to do for them, for me, or it could be nonsense. Like, how am I doing this? Let's, pay attention and see. And no one else can really decide that for me. They might look at it and think it's one way, and I know based on history with them that it's useful.
Could I ask Ida Medina a question? Because I was supposed to I did go to Vedanta, which is out by Lima, to do a self-retreat, and they actually told me to come back because the storm was coming in. And so I tried to make retreat, but I really actually, because of the way things had gone down there, really needed comfort and wanted to just watch my Spanish soap operas and relax on the couch in front of the fire, but I wouldn't let myself because I'm supposed to be on retreat now, so I have to admit. So Ida Medina, we had an email exchange and she said, what about just doing nothing? But so what does that look like? Really? What did you think about? I mean, what do you mean when you allow yourself to do nothing? What's that like?
Well, that was not so much as opposed to like watching like Spanish soap operas or like thing, but it was more like enforcing practice if you're tired or distracted, and so feeling this idea that practice becomes like becoming active or like becomes like more doing. So it becomes like a new task. And so like the idea of doing nothing is like if practice is becoming like a worldly endeavor that you're getting active about wholesome activities, and then it becomes some kind of imperative. It's just really I mean it's a self-defeating, I feel, in the sense that it creates even more agitation because it's like you should. So it kind of, and also, I mean, honestly speaking, I mean, if you're tired or you're distracted, I mean, in my experience, if I just push it, you create even more agitation. So it's just better, I mean, when I have like long retreats, like 3 months retreat, the first week I'm just sleeping. I mean, I maybe meditate a bit, I eat and sleep and walk and until you are really rested. Because I don't think it works, this kind of push, because it comes from the same ego place, like you just replace one kind of directive mode with another, but yeah.
I did sleep a lot that day.
Yeah, but it's fine. It's just quality. It's not just also quantity, like practice.
Yeah.
So just 1 hour of clarity is better than 3 hours just nodding and like this pathetic. We all do it. It's pathetic. It's just go to sleep. Yeah.
Okay, the pair. Those who know the essential to be essential and the unessential to be unessential, dwelling in right thoughts, arrive at the essential.
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Saram chacha sarato nyatva ataram chata chatarato te saram adighachanti samma sankappa gochara. And by the way, you will recognize from the words Micha, Sankappa, Samma Sankappa, like noble eightfold path, right thought, wrong thought. So this is what it is about. It's like one factor of the noble eightfold path. And maybe it gets lost in translation.
Yeah, Samma Sankappa.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Samma Sankappa. Or right intention. And I like the right intention definition of, say, kindness. Oh, how does it go? Gentleness and I don't remember. I'll come up with it later, probably. Letting go. Yeah, that's right. Kindness, gentleness, and letting go. What do you think?
I've never heard put it in that way. Like the official definition is like this like intention of sort of non-cruelty, non-harm, like that. But it's like, I mean, what you're saying is like putting it in the positive quality. Yeah. So like if you say non-harming, you can say intent, like compassion or kindness is just like flipping it over. So it can go all the way to the Brahma Viharas actually. Yeah. And also maybe the letting go clicks with the intention of renunciation, which is the third factor or something.
Yeah. So for me, like non-harming, non-cruelty, and renunciation, it just doesn't have it doesn't grab my heart the same way as kindness, gentleness, and letting go. So you kind of like, okay, it is non-harming. I like non-cruelty, yes. And, what is it that inspires the mind? Really have that be the context within which we think and speak and act all the time. Nice. Okay, verse 13. Just as the rain breaks through an ill-thatched house, even so passion penetrates an undeveloped mind.
यथा गरं रुच्छन्नं बुद्धि समतिविज्जति एवं भवितं चित्तं rago samativiज्जति. We'll do the next together.
Okay.
यथा गरं सुच्छन्नं बुद्धि न समतिविज्जति एवं भावितं चित्तं रागो न समतिविज्जति.
Just as the rain does not break through a well-thatched house, even so passion never penetrates a well-developed mind. So check your thatch.
Have the word passion a little bit from the Pali.
Let's see. Yeah, what do you think? The raga? Yeah, raga or not raga. So it's the really strong desire, passion, that's not craving. Do you have other words for it?
I mean, like the etymology is has to do with coloring. So like raga, like comes from rangat, which means to color, like color in red, but also just to color. Sorry, my accent is like color. You get it? Color. Yeah, color.
Color. Midwestern drawl, your color.
I see faces, yeah, so it's like you're coloring things, so you are like investing them with passion, and then like this passion is like you're no longer coloring them, and also they lose color because you're not projecting color on them. So that's the origin of this word. So maybe passion is not quite, or yeah, I don't know. It's like coloring or discoloring. It would be like a very literal way of looking at it.
Would it be influence?
It's more than that, I think. I think it really is, the heat on it, like if you're going to color something red, that passion, that strong desire, that really affects the mind. So it's coloring the mind, really. And it's not calm. It's not peaceful. It's like wanting. It's like a very strong push.
Yeah, it's like your eyes are full of lust, and then you construct a lust, an object of lust. If you don't have lust in your eyes, you're not projecting, like that kind of. They really go together with this coloring. It in Pali it's both, like the coloring, but also you're getting yourself colored with that kind of.
Yeah, like when the guys I used to work with for years just suddenly started looking very attractive. It's like, whoa, something's wrong here. There's something going on in here. It's nothing to do with them. Yeah.
It's also if you're dyeing something, it dyes your hands too. It dyes the object.
Yes.
It dyes your hands.
Holly?
Thank you, Iris. I was wondering if, if there is any point at which a wholesome urge, desire becomes unwholesome in this way. Is there any, or aversion or a desire?
I mean, if you take a wholesome desire, like I want to get enlightened, okay? Yeah, when it comes from a sense of self, I want my personality to get enlightened. Or sometimes people are like, I'm enlightened. It's become unwholesome because it's not the true, experience of awakening, because that would be without the self. So sometimes, someone will want validation that they've, experienced dream entry, say. And there's so much attachment to that attainment and so much selfing coming out around it that it's clear that it hasn't happened. And the person gets stuck on that. And they've seen it all. They've already made it part of their identity, and they can't let it go. And they can't see the essential. They're caught up in, they want to see themselves as being attained. And so there's something that just a simple example. So it's like the mind can change so fast. Like a wholesome intention can flip to being something that comes from the ego, and it's now colored. And the Buddha even said you can't even find a simile to really demonstrate how fast the mind goes. So we do have to be watching it. And the way to tell, I think the best way to tell is there's suffering. If we're really not attaching it, there's no suffering in it. Even if, someone comes to a teacher and says, this or that happened to me, what do you think? And they've got this feeling that they've attained something, but then they hear, no, that doesn't really add up. Then they go, okay. And just let it go. And like, okay, what are the causes and conditions I should be putting in now? Or maybe the teacher says, I'm not going to validate that because it's so easy for it to become a possession of the ego. And the student says, well, does it matter if I know whether it happened or not? And they say, no, it doesn't matter. And then it's like, okay, there's still defilement. I still have work to do. Where I'm at on this path doesn't matter. Because I know what's next. I have to practice. So it's things like that, it can so easily go off the track and really get us stuck. So just an example.
Well, that's another area about balance for me. Sometimes I have to push myself a little bit, like my daughter might ask me to do something that's, like to watch my grandchild. And I may have other things. It's like an effort. I kind of want to. So it's like, so there's a wholesome desire to be helpful. But there's other things in there. Like, no, I don't really feel like driving up there. Sometimes my granddaughter is a little bit difficult to be around. So it's not just weighing it out, which that's another one of those watching it carefully. How much there's some, I wouldn't call it suffering, but discomfort or inconvenience. And yet wanting to be useful and helpful and kind, caring. I find a lot of things in that. It's very rare that it's like, oh yeah, that's good. Oh yeah, that's no good. Most things for me are very mixed.
Well, that's the nature of samsara. Things are very mixed.
And it's very hard to tell, which side should I back off this and let it go? Or should I push through because there's more benefit than not?
It is very hard to tell. And sometimes you make a decision that feels like it's pretty good, and sometimes you make a decision that, well, no, that really isn't going so well.
Right.
And that's just that natural.
Yeah.
That's just part of the samsaric deal, as far as I can tell. There's a lot to come. Yes. Any other comments? Questions? Okay. I'll just read both of them, and then you read both of them, something like that. Okay, the evildoer grieves here, and he grieves hereafter. He grieves in both worlds. He laments and is afflicted. recollecting his own impure deeds. The doer of good rejoices here. He rejoices hereafter. He rejoices in both worlds. He rejoices and exults, recollecting his own pure deeds.
Ida sochati pecha sochatim papakari ubhayatta sochatim so sochati so vihanyati viswakam makilitam mattano Ida modati pecha modati kata punyo ubhayatta modati so modati sopamodati viswakam mavisubhim mattano.
This is also challenging because no evil doer is all evil.
Yeah.
And no good doer is all good. We've all done things that aren't so good. So how do you sort that out? Well, the Buddha's, kind of simile of the salt in the glass of water or in the lake. This is really the way to look at things. And even if we see the mistakes we made or a pattern of mistakes or, a habit of following an unwholesome energy like anger or resentment or whatever, then when we look at, something like the process the Buddha described in Majjhima Nikaya 8 on effacement, okay, you use non-anger to overcome the anger, to bypass. So how do you go from anger to non-anger? Being with the feeling, letting it pass, seeing what it's like to be without that anger, and then making a decision how to proceed from there. And Buddha said the more we do that, the more he said, walk on the smooth path rather than the rough path. Sometimes you can get pretty good at shifting away from this unwholesome tendency or urge or pattern. The more we do that, the more it wears away that habit or that, kind of like connection that keeps, following that trail. And then eventually it doesn't even come up anymore. And so maybe we go from being evil doer to a good doer, a doer of good, and hopefully until we can't even recognize that kind of addition of ourselves, that particular phase of ourselves. And there are things you get to a point where I never would go back to doing that or seeing things in that way. And then there is some real change that occurs. And then when those changes occur, like I said before, we can't perfect our personality, but we do lay the groundwork for our mind to become more at peace, more happy, more joyful. It's easier to become still. It's easier for the still mind to be able to allow insight to arise. And then with the arising of insight and actually seeing things clearly, then we really don't go back to those old habits of harmful behavior. Allison?
So this really struck me, when you said everybody has a little bit of both with these, and the idea of greeds, so I have to say that I've done things in the past that I do feel really badly about and worked them out with people and they've forgiven me and I know they've genuinely forgiven me, but I can't forgive myself. If I think of it, I feel real physical pain. Do you have any suggestions for how to deal with that?
Yeah, I think it's important to reinforce with ourselves that this is not helping, that this is harming, to keep that alive. And like we can wince over a memory about anything, it can be something we felt like we were really stupid or it was inconsiderate or something really downright immoral or whatever. But there were causes and conditions. One thing to remember is that our memory is not at all trustworthy. We don't remember the causes and conditions that were in play. We don't really remember what it was that built up this, made it possible to take that action. And then, once we've recognized it and we've gone through all of the ways of trying to rectify it that can be done, it seems incredibly unfair to keep beating up that previous version of ourselves that's in the past, that we cannot change the past, and then learn to accept and let that go, having learned from it. And, at some point we have to have that compassion for ourselves. And like I said, just reflect upon the result. When I have this thought that, is still so unforgiving, still so ungenerous with myself, what's the result? And if we've been trained that the result is that you're going to be better if you beat yourself up, which is a lot of times what we've been taught, is it true? Because we need to investigate all kinds of things that we believe about ourselves and others and the world and, the past, the future, whatever, like if we are holding assumptions, we should investigate them and really see if that's true or not. See if we can experience it ourselves, whatever it is. So I think it takes investigation and a real development of generosity, seeing that this too is an act of generosity. And really taking in the reality that you're not that person anymore. We don't stay the same. We have to really work hard to stay the same. Like my image is you're standing in a really fast rushing river and you're just holding on for dear life to stay the same, and you can't really do it. And and if we're practicing, we're certainly not going to stay the same. And so that version of ourself, you can hardly recognize them at some point anymore. Can we let them go? Yeah.
Like these two passages, it says to me, the evildoer, being an evildoer is its own result, and being a doer of good rejoices is its own result.
That's part of it, for sure. Anyway, right? You're going to feel happy if we do good things, or at least we should. Sometimes we have a pattern that is, we don't want to acknowledge the good that we do. But, a healthy, logical thing is that there is it is a good result to be happy and rejoice.
Right. It's not as easy to look at an evildoer and realize that he's going to get his comeuppance.
Really? Because how miserable is it to, for example, be a pathological liar? That can't be comfortable.
Right. I agree, but I think there is some thinking. There is a kind of thinking which is that maybe that's the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Well, sure. Like regardless of what people do, in that moment they think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And then, there can be a tremendous amount of delusion there. What brings a person to that point?
Yeah.
And yeah, what brings a person to the point of the next right thing to do is to take an automatic weapon and shoot up a school. What in the world's happening there, right? Or any violent action. And, you know, to really, if we, like on Gulimala, the serial killer, when the Buddha comes to see him, so kind of wakes up in that moment and he realizes what he's done. Like, what must that feel like? And he realized in that moment that the Buddha came specifically to help him, and it just broke him down. He was, yeah, can you imagine? And then to be able to hold all that, forgive all that. It's a lot. But, it's like, yeah, I think the more we reflect on karma and the way it works, the easier it is to see how doing immoral things, taking advantage of people, deceiving people, lying, all of those, that there is an immediate painful result. And sometimes people get used to being in that place of suffering, and they don't recognize how much suffering they're experiencing. But it really does take its toll. Yeah. And then, the psychology there can have all different kinds of twists to it. But yeah, it's reflecting on karma. You can really realize that doing kind of evil things or doing, unwholesome things really is the only thing to fear. We don't have to be afraid of what happens to us. We'll be afraid of doing something wrong. Holly?
Thank you. You may have just touched on it with some of the things you just said, but I was thinking about how, you even mentioned delusion, how obviously we're practicing here, right? So I feel like it's less likely that we're going to be doing some overtly unwholesome things. But I know that I'm real good at justifying things. I'm real good at rationalizing things. And so you know, how do we recognize when we're in that delusion? But then you mentioned like if we continue practicing, we're not going to stay the same. So maybe that's just the answer. But whatever it is.
Yeah, if we really take the First Noble Truth seriously, when there's dukkha, then it's time to investigate. And if we have trouble seeing for ourselves where this dukkha is coming from, then we can turn to our friends, our kalyanamitas, our teachers, and talk to them. Because a lot of times, if something is so deeply ingrained, we may not be able to tell ourselves. But if we are willing to hear what other people see us doing, then it can really help us a lot. And sometimes, I've seen people, they really are trying, they're really, serious about their practice, but they're still not open at all to hearing like what's really going on with them. And other people can see it. Most of the time, other people can see what we're doing. If we're deluded about our own behavior, nobody else is missing it. We're the ones who don't get it. So, just really wanting the reflection, wanting the mirror held up to our face and cleaning it and making sure we can see. And then, sometimes even when we're told we can't see it, but that's the time to really be willing to drop it, drop all of our shields, our pretense, drop all of our facades, Don't say face. Face or face. You know, so I can really see what's going on. Thank you, Holly.
Also because we have our sister scholar here, I'm wondering about the word recollecting and use here, and is it related to sati or not related?
It's actually, this one is like having seen for oneself. It's the same word in like seeing, or yeah, it's like having acknowledged. So it's not I think it's stronger than recollection, because recollection can be more like, like a cognitive exercise, but seeing, you really see it, like you get to see it.
What's the Pali word?
This one, like having seen.
Could you spell it?
Having seen disva.
The Pali?
D-I-S.
It's like,
I don't have it in Pali.
It's just like a verbal form, which is like, I don't know, in English it's called gerund. So having done that,
Yeah.
disva,
Have you-
D-I-S-V long A.
Oh,
This
thank
one.
you. Oh, okay. Now, I've never seen that word. Not that.
It's this, you have maybe heard like samadhi, right view.
Yes.
So DT, this is why it's the same verb. Yeah, it means like right view, right vision. This is exactly the same word. Yeah.
Can we just keep her? I mean, I need this. This is great. So the next two look pretty similar. What do you think? The evildoer suffers here, and he suffers hereafter. He suffers in both worlds. The thought, evil have I done, torments him, and he suffers even more when gone to realms of woe. Whoa. The doer of good delights here. He delights hereafter. He delights in both worlds. The thought, good have I done, delights him, and he delights even more when gone to realms of bliss.
Yeah, so it's either tappati, picha tappati, papakari, ubhayatta tappati, papam me katamti tappati, jiyo tappati dugatim gato, ida nandati picha nandati, kata punyo ubhayatta nandati, punyam me katamti nandati, biyo nandati sugatim gato.
What is the word for delight in the following?
Nandati, like Nanda, like Chittananda.
What does it mean in Pali?
You can,
What's the broader
I think
meaning?
she can speak for herself.
So, is there I mean, what's the actual translation? Is it delight?
Yeah, bliss or joy, usually.
Well, you can also like have Nandana with respect to craving. So those who crave take delight here and there. That's the same word, like Nandini. Like, so if you have wrong sankappa, you take delight in the wrong things, or something like that.
And here and there is like in this world and the next.
Yeah. Yes.
Again and again and again and again. Yeah. So we had already been talking about this. Evil have I done torments him. I think the problem is when evil have I done torments us when we've only done this much evil. When we got this much good. You know,
and then there's people who do this much evil and don't seem very tormented.
So far.
So far.
Yeah. Except that I can't imagine. I think there's a lot of dukkha there that
There must be.
But they don't feel it. I talked about this with my therapist the other day, but surely they must internally be suffering. And she said, I don't think so.
well, I don't know. It depends on how deep you scratch, I think.
But they can be so well armed. You know, you can have armor. If you have that pain inside, you can really have thick armor and not be and so disconnected that you can't. I speak from my own experience because I was very well armed till I came to the practice. You know, you just don't. you
Yeah.
don't feel it. You don't feel period.
But you know, sometimes you can see the behaviors of such folks and really see that there's a tremendous amount of dukkha there. That's pretty pitiable. Anyway, yeah, I mean, certainly the mind has all kinds of potential for being unbalanced. So how unbalanced it has to be to not really know you're making, you know, so much trouble. Who knows?
And is there like brain dysfunction, like a sociopath who may actually have a brain dysfunction and simply doesn't have that, you know, that whatever it is, superego controlling? Or I'm not sure. I'm not a psychologist, but
Yeah, it's out of my depth for sure, but yeah.
I mean, I think it's also a matter of, there is unwholesome pleasure in being evil or in doing evil. So it's like, and that dukkha, is not so, I mean, this dukkha and sukha, like, dukkha is not actually just suffering, it's just, something which is unsatisfactory, but here is like suffering. So you could be doing something very unwholesome with that kind of, rejoicing in it. I mean, this is like, the evil mindset that rejoices, and that kind of happiness, it's an unwholesome form of happiness. So you would never have, empathic joy for someone who is like doing something like that, although it's kind of gratifying, it's a kind of unwholesome gratification they experience, but that kind of unwholesome gratification is dukkha. Although it's perceived as pleasant by the person who is doing it, but it's obviously not sukha, not happiness. So I think there is also that component there, that kind of, I mean, craving is pleasant in a very unwholesome way, but it's dukkha, it's unsatisfactory because you can't sustain it anyway. So I think that's also maybe part of the picture, and also with defense mechanisms that you have is also like, you keep, you protect yourself from seeing that craving as unwholesome pleasure.
Yeah, Ajahn Dhamma talks about joy being a karmic intensifier. Like if you have joy when you do good, like the Buddha says, when you give, you should have joy before you give, while you give, after you give, And he said when you do evil things and you have joy, it's a karmic intensifier for the bad kind.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's like that makes it all the worse. Yeah.
But there's also, like if you have mindfulness, if you don't have mindfulness, because if you are trying to practice the four establishments of mindfulness with regard to feelings, like pleasant or unpleasant feelings, you can, I mean, you can become slowly aware of the pleasant feeling associated with an evil action. And then as you keep practicing, you can no longer, desire that feeling. So it's also like, like if you, like, I think this is why it's also saying, here and in the future, because like here you can become aware of your response to that that pleasant feeling that comes from unwholesome things. And so you can be mindful of, being an evil doer. It's like mindfulness doesn't exclude, you can be mindful of unwholesome state. And the more you're mindful of unwholesome state, the quicker you stop, having unwholesome states, because actually you can no longer perceive as, happy that which is actually, just unwholesome pleasure. So yeah, I think, I would just see it like that.
Anger is a good example because you can get a
Exactly.
rush from anger or feel powerful. But then when you start to see the negative ramifications, you really get that. It's like,
the unwholesome gratification reminds me of like cocaine or a drug, which then made me think that it is that unwholesome activities can be like a drug. You get pulled into it because it feels good in the moment, like the anger.
and depending on the context, you might even feel gratification from what people think of you because you have all this attention or you have all of this respect from other people who are doing bad things. It's like it can be really tricky. Yeah. Yeah.
Do we know when these writings were done?
Actually, I mean, these are not really writings, so this is like these are oral teachings which were like put into writing, at some point. So basically, I mean, I think this is important to bear in mind. So when we are dealing with this type of texts, these are just oral texts which were, born in oral context and then transmitted orally. And then, so they were put into writing, in different places at different times. So the age of, the manuscript or of the edition doesn't equal the age of the text. So they were like, roughly from the Buddha's time. And some of these verses, they're also like not particularly Buddhist. They were, also just used at the Buddha's time. But the stories in the commentary that Chitananda was, sorry. I'm getting fantastic, all this Nanda in my head.
How lovely, you got all those nuns in your head.
I just want to say it's kind of pointing to, they were like later, so they were trying to turn this kind of verses into Buddhist content by embedding them. But so to say, just to bear in mind that when you see like a written text, it doesn't say, the age of the written text doesn't say how old this text is, because this is oral kind of tradition. So that being said, like 2nd century BC approximately, in written form in this particular case. Yeah.
Thank you.
I love this.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have one more pair before the end of this section, and I think we'll try to do that and close. So, although he recites many sacred texts, if he does not act accordingly, that heedless man is like a cowherd who only counts the cattle of others. He does not partake of the blessings of a holy life. Although he recites few sacred texts, if he puts the Dhamma into practice, forsaking lust, hatred, and delusion, with true wisdom and emancipated mind, clinging to nothing in this or any other world, he indeed partakes of the blessings of a holy life.
Pahumpi chetahitam bhasamano natakaroti narapamato gopava gavo ganayam pareham na bhagava samanyasahoti appam pipecha sahitam bhasamano dhammasauti anudhammachari ragam cha dosam cha pahaya moham Samapajano savimutta chitto anupadiyano idam vahuram va anupadiyano ida vahuram va sambhagava samanyasahoti.
Wow, beautiful.
Yeah, this is like a different verse, so you can see it kind of goes different, like runs differently.
A little different form.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I like it, although you recite few sacred texts, if you put the Dhamma into practice, forsaking lust, hatred, and delusion with true wisdom and emancipated mind, clinging to nothing in this or any other world, you indeed partake of the blessings of a holy life. Yeah. That's great. Anything else about this? No. Anything?
Maybe just for context, I mean, I don't know about the commentarial history that got attached to this verse, but probably, this is like targeting other ascetics, like other samanas at the Buddha's time, who were like into reciting, texts and formulas and being learned in that way, but, not reaching the end of greed, hatred, and delusion. And then, being very learned on account of that and getting, support, etc. Because it's using this word samanya. So samanya, like the samana or the recluse or ascetic. So it's often used to include non-Buddhist samanas. So non-Buddhist ascetics. So this is not just targeting Buddhist practitioners, but it's also, I think most likely it's kind of spoken with that kind of thing in mind.
Of course, it's true for everybody.
Yeah.
We don't practice what we learn, practice what we preach. Counting somebody else's cows, man. Yeah. Can't get the results without our own direct experience. And it requires that we really see it for ourselves, learn it for ourselves, do it, follow through with it, and rejoice in that following through and feeling the Dhamma alive in our own being. This the place we take our stand, letting go of our habits and patterns and views and opinions that bolster the sense of self. And sometimes we need some psychological support to help the mind deal with past trauma or other challenges so that there's enough stability to be able to let go of the sense of self. As we talked a little bit before. And to do that work, to really recognize that if we're clinging to this idea of who we are, it just holds us back. It's like a chain, a ball and chain, And if we can set it aside, drop the facade, drop the pretense, really observe what arises within us is kindness, compassion, joy, peace. You can really be happy and free of fear. Ajahn Gana said, yeah, when you don't have a sense of self, you're going to sleep well. Okay, I'm working on that, Ajahn. That's great.
Have you all ever noticed how monastics don't have any wrinkles?
Oh,
I don't think we should hold them to that.
You look closely. Yeah, the aging happens for sure. And I think it's not caring about wrinkles is really the way to go. Yeah. Good one.
I wanted to ask an unrelated question, if that's okay. I was wondering if Ayya Dhammadina has a monastery where she practices, since I'm thinking I'm probably going to be in Europe by the middle of this year. And I'm going to be looking for things like retreats that are on more of a European time frame. The Sutta study, the 7 p.m. Sutta study will be 3 a.m. when I'm over there, so I might not be coming to that one as often. And and also Ayya Dhammadina, if you're doing teachings anywhere, or if there's a monastery that I can visit.
Yeah, I mean, I live a very hermetic life, so I don't, I don't have like a monastery. I just have a small hermitage.
You can go
and maybe it's easier there. So, and I mean, I do teach in Italian, in Italy, but in Italian. So you're welcome. I mean, maybe I can send, our like information out, and maybe, I mean, you can also be in touch with others in our group, who can speak English. I mean, I'm assuming you don't speak Italian, right?
No.
Yeah.
Not yet. I'm working on Portuguese, but
it's not so. It's actually quite close. I mean, like you can if you read Portuguese, you can read Italian, but it takes some time to switch the grammar in your ears. But then I mean, I'm sometimes I do teach in English or like Spanish, but yeah, I mean, very occasionally Spanish because I'm not up to that. But maybe I'll send the information. If you send a line to maybe Karuna Buddhist Vihara, then I can forward the the link to what we are doing in Italy. And anyway, even if you can't come to what we're doing, but maybe some others can be in touch, or just make contact.
Thank you.
Okay.
It looks like we did it. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
It's lovely to see you all and practice together.